Journey to the Cross. Today is a time to slow down, to focus on Jesus. This isn't an intellectual exercise. Rather, it is an invitation to enter into a faith-filled experience through prayer. You could read through the text of each of the stations and look at the pictures, but that wouldn't necessarily be prayer. It becomes prayer when I open my heart to be touched, and it leads me to express my response to God. Take your time as you go through the stations of Jesus' journey to the cross. You do not need to rush. Read slowly. Let the words of reflection sink in. Spend as long as you want at each station. If you're drawn to stay at a particular spot for a long time, feel free to pause the video and stay a while. Move to the next station whenever you're ready. At each station, you will have the opportunity to respond to God by using these items. You will need a Bible, a prayer journal, a cross, a nail, a candle, a cup and juice, and a piece of bread. You may pause the video now if you need to get these items. Now remember, if you don't have these items, it's okay. They are simply tools to help facilitate an encounter with God. You may respond to God by using your own prayer journal to write your thoughts. You may write a word, a prayer, or draw a picture. You may choose to pray out loud, or even meditate quietly. Remember, this journey to the cross is not about an agenda or meeting anyone's expectations. It is simply a time and a place for you to draw close to Jesus. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. What noise exists in your life and causes distraction? Sometimes in all the busyness, and yes, even being cooped up in our own home, we get caught up with distractions that cause us to put God into the background of our life. Today, as you settle into this prayer time, take a moment to let the busyness of life and anything cluttering your heart and mind to clear completely. Stop all the noise and open yourself up for God to meet you. Use the stillness as a reminder to quiet your spirit before God. I invite you to light your candle and ask God to quiet your thoughts and focus on Him. Come, Holy Spirit. Speak to us. We want to hear your voice through this journey. John 1:14. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. Today you are invited on a journey through the last days and hours of Jesus' life. On your screen you will see a pair of sandals, the kind that any ordinary man would wear. As you begin this journey with Jesus, focus on what it means for the eternal God to become a man. Think about what it means that Jesus once stood in sandals just like these. The God who created the world stepped into an ordinary human body. Take time to meditate on the mystery, majesty, and humility of Jesus, the Son of God. John 12:1-8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived. A dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus reclined at the table with him. Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. The house filled with the fragrance of the perfume. One of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Mary poured out expensive perfume onto Jesus' feet as an act of worship. You may think of the different fragrances that you put on yourself, such as perfume or cologne, or even something nice smelling like an essential oil. The fragrance may not be strong at first, but you will smell it for hours. It is long-lasting. Mary's act of worship was pure, passionate, real, expensive, and extravagant. It touched the heart of Jesus. She knew he was headed to the cross, and Mary's act of worship was a blessing to him. How can you pour out your love to Jesus extravagantly, in a way that will spread the beautiful fragrance of Jesus wherever you are? Let each fragrance remind you that we are called to live every moment of our lives in fragrant worship of Jesus. Matthew 26:14-16. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 silver coins. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Judas was one of Jesus' closest friends, one of the 12 disciples who had been with him for 3 years. He agreed to betray Jesus for just 30 silver coins. You will see a picture of coins on your screen. You may even want to hold 1 or 2 of them to feel the weight in your hand. How could Judas betray Jesus, his friend, for money? How do you think Judas felt when he looked at the coins in his hand and realized what he had traded them for? Is your own heart tempted to betray Jesus over material things? Take this time to talk with him about it. John 13:21-30. After he had said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, "I tell you the truth, one of you is going to betray me." His disciples stared at one another, at a loss to know which of them he meant. One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, "Ask him which one he means." Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." Then, dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. "What you are about to do, do quickly," Jesus told him. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had charge of the money, some thought Jesus was telling him to buy what was needed for the feast, or to give something to the poor. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. Jesus was celebrating the Passover feast with his disciples. Tear off a piece of bread and eat it as Jesus did. As you're eating, think of the heartbreak he must have been feeling at the betrayal of one of his own disciples. He knew his disciples would soon face confusion and fear. Contemplate his sorrow and compassion for them. Matthew 26:36-46. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Could you men not keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour is near, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." This scene reveals the sorrow in Jesus' heart that night. He prayed to his Father that he would not have to go to the cross if there were any other way. Yet he prayed the hardest prayer any of us can pray. "Yet not as I will, but as you will." When Jesus said, "May this cup be taken from me," he was referring to the difficult thing his Father was asking him to bear. Yet he chose to drink the cup, even though it was painful. Pour a cup of grape juice and drink it. As you do, remember that Jesus chose to bear the agony of the cross, to drink the cup, to save you. Is there a cup that the Father is asking you to drink? Something about which you need to pray the prayer of Gethsemane? Yet not as I will, but as you will. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I told you that I am he," Jesus answered. "If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Even though Jesus could have given the word and overpowered all the guards, he let himself be bound and led away. Think about this rope. Imagine it being tied around your hands and wrists. Remember that Jesus was bound with a rope just like this one. He knew what bondage was like. He knew and knows our bondage. And yet he chose to submit to the difficult way of the cross, and with every step that he took, he had our freedom in mind. Matthew 26, 57 through 60, and chapter 27, verses 27 through 31. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. And after they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. Imagine yourself in Peter's shoes. You are looking out over the courtyard where Jesus is being tried and mocked. You know that he is being unjustly accused. As you stand here, you see men telling lies about him. You watch him being beaten and mocked. Here is the man you have followed for 3 years, the man you had put all your hope in, being sentenced to death. In your heart, you have believed he is God, the promised Messiah of the Jewish people. Your whole world is crashing around you, and worst of all, you have denied that you even know him. Look at the purple robe and the crown of thorns used by the angry soldiers to wound and humiliate Jesus. What do you want to tell Jesus right now? As they were going out, they met a man named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down they kept watch over him there. Above his head they placed the written charge against him, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross, if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him, for he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the robbers who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Jesus is made to carry the cross on which he will die. What he must have felt as he first took it upon his shoulders. With each step, he enters more deeply into our human experience. He walks in the path of human misery and suffering and experiences its crushing weight. Pick up the cross. Contemplate the wood. Imagine how heavy it is. Reflect upon all it means that Jesus is carrying the cross for you. Look into his eyes. His love for you is all there. And place yourself yet again with him on this journey, in its anguish, with sorrow and gratitude. Oh, the love that must have filled his heart. May that same love fill your heart today. And may you draw near to him and express your love and gratitude. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, Darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, and the rocks split. The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died before were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Here is Jesus, dying a brutal death on a Roman cross, an instrument of torture. Pick up the nail and hold it in your hand. Feel the weight of it. You may even want to kneel as if you were in front of the cross. Imagine yourself there at the scene. What is going through your mind? Don't rush this part. The sin of all human beings made Jesus go to the cross, not the Roman soldiers who arrested and beat him. His love for sinful human beings held him there. He could have answered the taunts by calling the angels of heaven to bring him down, but he didn't. He chose to stay. Think about the sin in your life, possibly something you've done in the past, or something you should have done, but did not. Maybe it's an attitude in your heart. Write it down. Confess it, either out loud or on a piece of paper. Now, as you have that nail in your hand, imagine as if you were driving that nail into the cross. Think about how your sins were nailed to the cross that day. With each stroke of a hammer, remember Jesus' words, "It is finished." He bore the pain of the cross so you could be forgiven and set free from slavery to your sin. Matthew 27:57 through 61. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out for the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The rock you see here is like the one that sealed Jesus' tomb. Imagine the heaviness of this rock. Can you sense the heavy weight the disciples and those who loved Jesus must have felt as Jesus' tomb was sealed? In their eyes, death had won. This was a stone that no one could move. It was final. Jesus was gone and buried. When Jesus died that day, so many people watching must have thought that their hopes had died as well. Darkness came over all the land. Now take your candle and extinguish it. Remember the darkness that the whole world and heaven itself must have felt that day.